I finally learned the truth about my engagement ring, and I can't stop crying about it.
Wah, wah.
For context, me, female 33, and my husband, 37, have been together for about 10 years. I met him a year after he got back from deployment in Iraq and immediately fell in love with him.
Yeah. What do you call that? Love at first getting back from deployment?
Yep, that's exactly what they call it. By the way, this comes from Miss G Pinecone Hunter on the r/OK Storytime subreddit. So I continued the relationship knowing he comes with a lot of baggage. He has mild PTSD from his service, as well as having the emotionally manipulative family from the HE double hockey sticks. When I met him, he was roughly a year out of his divorce with his first wife. Long story short, she had been cheating on him the entire duration of deployment, and she had confessed it and divorced him pretty much the moment he got back in the country.
Oh, well, at least she did it immediately. That's a silver lining, right? Like, you didn't have to pretend to play house for like a couple months before she broke. She just told you straight up.
Because of his history with his ex, I always felt the need to walk on eggshells and never ask too much. His family immediately started treating me like garbage, making passive-aggressive comments about my appearance, my job, I'm a teacher, and insinuating I'm taking advantage of their son and brother. My husband insisted that they were only treating me this way because they were nervous that I would be the same as his ex, and I let it slide, believing him when he said if I stuck it out and it was kind of to them, they would change their mind. However, my ignoring their rudeness only seemed to encourage them to be more bold. They've done terrible things to me since then, such as telling anyone who would listen I cheated on my husband before the wedding, which by their own admission they had no proof. They just thought I seemed like the type. Every time I would approach my husband and discuss the mistreatment of me by his family, he would just remind me that his ex had cheated on him, so they were probably being overly protective just to ignore them. And that's why I would have let aside when he would spend all of his very few days off at his mother's house doing chores for her, or when we had to leave events early because she was calling him to come take care of things for her, or we wouldn't be able to go on vacations because he had to help his mother, and even financing his siblings with things that were not super necessary, such as paying to store his brother's classic car for the winter, or paying his sister to stay in a hotel room for a conference she was going to. I continued my best to try and prove I was not materialistic and using my husband. Eventually, while we were dating, we discussed many times the ring I would like. I said I never wanted anything too flashy or expensive, but I had been very specific with what I did not want it to be. A little over a year into our relationship, he proposed. When I saw the ring, I was more than a little surprised at the fact that it was pretty much everything I said I did not want it to be stylistically.
Red flag. How? You didn't even tell him what you want. You said, this is what I don't want. And he gave you that. Exactly that. Wait, is that actually, was he listening, but he just got confused? He's actually a really good listener. He just missed the part where you said, not what I want.
Yeah, babe, I thought you said this is what you want. Don't think of elephants. What are you going to think of?
Zebras.
Actually, I thought of a snake.
Okay, well, you're going to think of elephants.
Yeah,
Inception.
like a python. I thought of a snake.
Snake!
Nah, but yeah, if you tell someone like, don't do this, it sounds like they're going to do it because they're dumb. I just told myself that if this was all he could afford and he bought it out of love, so I would live with it and never say anything.
And never say anything. That's not the right thing to do. Communication is key. Just leave it at that.
Communication is key on.
Communication is key
wow,
on.
that's perfect, actually. Fast.
I approve this message.
Forward 5 stinking years later. After the birth of our first son, his attitude towards his family did a 180. For the first time, he saw his family for what they really were. They were uncaring towards my son and just kept demanding that my husband keep servicing them the way he always had. They were unsymptomatic to the fact that we had a newborn and kept the threats they usually have been using for years, primarily that they would cut off all ties with him if he kept changing.
For all of our listeners, I'm voraciously waving a red flag, because how are you going to tell someone they are not allowed to change? That is what life is. Life is a journey of change.
Tell them. He finally realized that they didn't care about him. They only cared about what he could do for them. We still invite them to holiday and birthday parties, but for the most part, we do not interact much. When things were a little too calm, his mother still calls to stir up crap. She knows how to play his guilt and PTSD to make him suffer for choosing me over her. However, since the birth of our son, he is the perfect husband to me in every way. He takes my opinion seriously, spoils me, and always values my feelings first.
Okay.
Now, present day and the issue at hand. We had been together for 10 years and married for 7, and we have 2 beautiful boys and a little girl due in 3 months.
Okay.
Our relationship and our family is perfect in every way. However, a month ago, when I went in to have my ring serviced, when the worker casually mentioned that it was a 1/4 carat ring, I asked her to repeat herself. Since my husband told me it was a 1.5 to 2 carats, she insisted that it was 0.4 was the correct size.
0.4 is pretty low.
Pretty low.
From what I am aware of.
Hey,
I'm not out
comparison's
there
the thief of
buying
joy.
wedding rings all day long, but doesn't seem like a lot, which is fine. Not everyone can afford like a big, expensive wedding ring, but at the same time, if you're storing your brother's sports car in the winter and you're buying hotel rooms and you're doing all this for your family, it's like, what?
Since that revelation, so much has made sense. For example, why everyone had seemed to make a face when I showed them my engagement ring. Why, when we were looking for wedding bands, every single store offered me to look at upgrades. Why I couldn't help but notice whether anyone else knew I got engaged. Their ring appeared to be double the size of mine. Not that I cared too much about it being big, but it stirred up every bad memory for how he used to treat me. How my feelings always had seemed to take a back burner to the opinions of his family. How now it made sense that even though he had a very good job at the time of our engagement, he got a very cheap ring because he was too busy financing his siblings' lifestyles. For the first 5 years of our life together, I wasn't good enough to have my feelings considered or honored. Finally, I got to the point where I couldn't even look at my ring finger without it all bringing up those terrible memories and me bursting into tears. Let's blame pregnancy hormones. So for the first time in 10 years, I decided to take off my engagement ring and put it away until I could get a hold of myself.
I'm thinking that this is not really about the ring.
Oh no.
It's about everything surrounding it.
Yeah.
So the ring's not really important here. What's important is I think you and your husband need to go to some counseling.
Mm-hmm.
You'll need to have a very crystal clear communication channel where you can express how you were feeling during this time period that's being drudged up when you look at your ring now.
Yep.
Because that's the real problem. It's not the ring.
No.
It's what happened, what surrounds the ring.
Yeah. This is not about the ring whatsoever. It's about exactly what my boy just said. Of course, my husband immediately noticed the next day and asked why I wasn't wearing it. I confessed what I had discovered and what I was feeling. As expected, he was the perfect husband about it. We had a long discussion about how he lives with the guilt every single day for how he was manipulated to treat me for the first 5 years and how he took full responsibility